I need a map.
I hate this! I know you do!
Oh, you're next.
You're next.
Better watch out.
I'm Mark.
And I'm Tom.
And we're the Cinemaniacs.
Yes, so we should probably briefly explain our disclaimer there toward the beginning.
Yes.
Not that, and I put all the onus on you because you're such a cheapskate. But so people maybe who aren't local might know Cheshire TV is recently, we're not in any, as Cheshire TV because I happen to be the president of the board of directors. But no financial problems or anything like that. But because local folks who live in Keene may know we're getting a second channel going. We're looking eventually to go HD, so we're buying a lot of new stuff. And with all of the local programming, and we really have a phenomenal amount of local programming going on, that's not cheap. We happen to have two somewhat talented engineers,
Highly skilled.
Dave Kirkpatrick and Rick Blood with us, and they're here for half an hour beforehand, putting up and breaking down for us. So the cost to run these things has Cheshire TV, and I say this because I'm a board member, we've had to turn the costs of producing these shows over to the producers. So for those of us, like you and me, and a lot of other people who do their programs in the studios here, not just bring them in and say, here, please produce this. Those costs are being transferred over to us, and I think that's perfectly fair. But when you're looking at pretty much for an hour-long show, $60 an hour, that's like $3,000 a year. And I have to take a look at where my budget is. I got a kid just getting out of school, and
you're a teacher, and I work at a public access
right.
station. Ain't nobody getting rich on this show.
So it could be tight. We certainly, I greatly appreciate our sponsors, Keene Cinemas and Video Headquarters. They let us in for free, so there's no cost there. But you and I spend a lot of time watching these movies, a lot of time preparing the clips, and to have to put up some extra bucks just to do the show, something's going to cut costs. So I'm hoping not at all to have this be our last show. I don't think it will be, but just to let everybody know that support your local cable company, and I think that'll help out too.
And also, if you're in the Keene area and you're a Time Warner subscriber, we suggest contacting your city councilor.
Yep.
Because part of the reason for all of this is that the city of Keene does not forward to Cheshire TV all of the funds that it collects for public access.
Right.
So that extra money that they retain for other purposes is what would make us not have to pay to do the show, frankly.
Right.
So feel free to contact your city councilor and let them know that you would like the city of Keene to give Cheshire TV 100% of the franchise fee.
That might be nice.
And of course, all of this means nothing to anybody who's not from Keene. So,
right.
Because of our voluminous interstatal
Speak
audience that we have. So anyway,
yes.
Have seen any movies lately?
I did, fortunately and unfortunately. Depends on what they may be, as is usually the case for the week. So would you like to begin?
Oh, would I ever?
I bet so.
I was out of town all this last weekend in Boston. I was seeing Eddie Izzard and Maria Bamford live. And so I got back on Saturday afternoon, and I used my phone to see the schedule for Keene Cinemas, and I said, wow, a movie starts in 10 minutes. So I rocketed to the theater. So I did nothing except, I guess I shouldn't complain. I did nothing but have fun all weekend. The first of the films that I saw was not the one I'm about to introduce. So what do you do when your name is Dorothy and you've just gotten back from Oz and all of the crazy hijinks that occurred in that classic story and film? Well, if your name is Dorothy, they yank you back. Just when you think you're out, they yank you back in Legends of Oz, Dorothy's Return.
Yes. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it just occurred to me.
Who's first?
The gumball judge
right.
was voiced by Brian Blessed, who fans of British TV and films and the Flash Gordon movie from 1980.
Right.
He's this really boisterous, I think very, very funny guy. And when I realized it was his voice, it made me
Was
smile.
he the King of the Valkyries or something like that?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. He yells a lot.
Yeah, he's loads of fun.
He's great. So I had seen that trailer last week. First I'd ever heard of this movie.
Okay.
And I thought, wow, this looks really cheap. This looks like bad animation and something that normally would have gone straight to video. And talking to our friends at the snack bar at the theater,
yes.
they were saying it looked like a rip-off movie. Like when a new big movie comes out, something that's really cheaply made gets rushed to video to confuse the marketplace. So I expected very little of this. And when it starts off, it's basically the storyline is time moves differently in Oz than it does in the modern day. So to Dorothy, she's just waking up from what we know as the first movie, whereas a lot of time has passed in Oz, and there's a new threat. It's somebody who turned this Jester character who's the brother of the Wicked Witch, and he's trying to take over everything. So her friends from the first movie, the Tin Man, the Cowardly Lion, and the Scarecrow, basically, as I said, they pull her back in. And when the movie starts with Dorothy, it's set in the modern day. I mean, it's very subtle, but you can see the clothing and some of the vehicles, and it's now. And I thought, well, it doesn't make a big difference to me that it's set now. It doesn't. I don't know why they did that.
Right.
Ultimately, there's no real reason why they did that, but whatever. Maybe to distance itself from the original movie a little bit. But when you see the human characters who are supposed to look like people, they're very floaty, and the lips are kind of vaguely moving along. And all I could think of was, I think they showed on the Daily Show sometimes, some network in Korea, when they do reenactments of like scandalous news stories,
right.
They have these really badly robotic CG recreations, and I was kind of getting that vibe from this, and I was thinking, oh, this movie's going to be a rough ride. But for me, once it went to Oz, that problem seemed to go away, because these are fantastical characters, and they're animated marshmallows and animated pieces of china, so didn't make a big deal to me. I was actually okay with this.
Okay.
I wouldn't recommend an adult go see this. I mean, it held my attention all the way through. Honestly, pretty colors. The colors were really vibrant and strong. A lot of the, for lack of a better term, production design was really creative and interesting and really pleasing to look at. I didn't really care for the music for the same reason I didn't care for the music in Frozen. It's much more contemporary Broadway Disney style of music as opposed to the songs from the original film. Music done by Bryan Adams. He wrote the songs, which was interesting. And it's a cast of people and names you recognize, but I didn't find that distracting. A lot of times I see, John Cleese has a voice, and all I can think of is, hey, I'm seeing John Cleese's face through the whole time and not this character. But everybody who does a voice tends to, like Dan Aykroyd, I don't think you would necessarily know it was him unless you knew it was him. Martin Short's pretty recognizable. So it was pretty inoffensive, very light on the, I was going to use a different phrase, on the rectal humor, which was pleasant. And about 90 minutes, not very long.
Yeah.
One thing I thought was interesting at the end, there was a whole lot of executive and associate producers listed. And they were like families, like, John and Rachel McAdams, or the Fred Johnson family. And it gave a strong vibe to me of, was this like a Kickstarter thing?
Yeah, right.
Because I'd never heard of this. Apparently this is based on a book by L. Frank Baum's grandson.
Right.
In broad strokes, it's the same thing. Dorothy is in Kansas, and she has a little bit of an argument with Aunt May or Annie M. Aunt May's a different movie.
Right.
And she sings a song when she's kind of near the hogs and near the animals.
Exactly.
And then she gets whisked to Oz, and in broad strokes, it's the same thing. But and again, at the beginning, that was kind of bugging me. I'm like, oh, really? Seriously? You're going to...
Yeah.
But I think it's fine for kids. I think it'll hold kids' interest. The kids who were there were giggling and laughing at times, so that was cool. Very nice to look at, ultimately. So I would say if you're an adult, I wouldn't say go see it, but I think if you're an adult who has to take a kid to go see this, I've sat through a lot worse movies than this, The Nut Job being one of them.
Right.
So for what it was, for a movie that never needed to be made and nobody's going to remember or probably even go see, Legends of Oz was okay.
Right, I'll agree. I think it was inoffensive. I was not looking forward to seeing this. I did think at some of the trailers that I'd seen that I thought the animation looked kind of interesting. So I went into this thinking, well, at least maybe the animation and we'll have pretty colors, which it does give us.
Yeah.
My 13-year-old went to see it primarily to laugh at it, I think, and he didn't.
Oh, interesting.
So I do think you're right that there.
Yeah, I would peg 13 as too old for this movie.
Right, and but he was entertained enough. He's not a huge Wizard of Oz fan. I enjoyed some of the little droplets of references to it. You're right. I mean, this is essentially a musical, and there's nothing that you go home singing. There's nothing I even remember.
There's nothing catchy, really.
I'm listening to it, and they're perfectly, fine songs, and I'm listening to the lyrics, and, oh, that's kind of clever, but nothing I'm going to remember. And certainly the Wizard of Oz has had, 80 years to be stuck in our heads, but I don't think this is going to be around that long. The characters, we meet the same characters, as you say, the Scarecrow and the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion at the beginning, and then they're kind of gone.
They're not in it much. They sort of frame the movie.
We lose them. I enjoyed some of the new characters that were created by Baum's grandson, and so I thought as a sequel, for the most part, it was perfectly fine. I didn't pick up that when we got back to Kansas, that it was modern day. And so when the evil landlord comes to take over the farm after the horrible twister, and he pulls up in like a 70s LTD, I'm like, wait a minute, what is going on?
I guess that maybe was one of the tips.
So that really threw me, and I didn't think to look around at the rest of it. So I didn't. I was certainly taken aback for a little while. But you're right. Once we get into Oz, it's perfectly fine. It does seem to take her. She takes this rainbow ride for about 5 minutes before she gets to Oz.
You have the option of seeing this in 3D, and
Yes.
timing did not allow me to do that.
We saw it in 3D.
I was going to say, I think I would have liked it even better in 3D because it seemed like it was probably well done.
Some of it was pretty interesting, yeah. And strangely enough, and you know that I personally hate the 3D for the most part because it's so infrequently used properly. I see a lot of new films coming out that are using it much better. I still think it's going to be a fad. I don't think 5 years from now we're going to see, 10 movies a year done in 3D, hopefully. But I thought that the 3D in this was pretty good. But you're right, ultimately. For just exclusively an adult, there's not much there at all. No real reason to see it, even if you're a freak Wizard of Oz fan. But if you've got a kid who wants to go see it, there's enough there to keep you going.
Yeah. So speaking of movies for kids.
Yeah, well, not exactly for kids, but...
I try to tie them together. It doesn't always work so good.
But a new freshman is attending... What are you folks talking about in there? A new freshman is attending his school, and he's got plans, and his girl wants him to do all the best classes and get going and really be on the right track. But he makes the mistake of enrolling in a philosophy class, and who better to teach a university philosophy class than Kevin Sorbo of
TV's Hercules.
Of TV's Hercules, exactly. So I went into this wondering what was going to happen. But Sorbo is not a big fan of religion, and he forces all of his class to kind of speed things along and disavow any knowledge or belief in the deity, except we have one freshman who's going to really prove that God's not dead. So wow, I went into this thinking, oh my God, Kevin Sorbo in a movie. He was really pretty good. Now
he's the biggest name in the cast list.
Right. I mean, Dean Cain maybe marginally ex-Superman, but this is purely a propaganda film, and I have no problem with that. It's upfront, and this is all about supporting. See, this was interesting. It's not about supporting religion. It's about supporting Christianity, because we have another religion very prominently displayed, and we have a very negative character associated with that. And I found that interesting. So this is very much about supporting Christianity and belief in Jesus Christ as the Savior. And how can you fault that premise? As a film, this was very competently made. I thought performances overall were pretty good. It's just in trying to maintain both a filmically critical distance and trying to maintain a distance between religious and non-religious. I thought it was really very clearly one-sided and a little bit too much, that the bad characters, Kevin Sorbo and Dean Cain, were a little bit too bad.
And the reporter who
suddenly is
the
stricken.
lefty reporter.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought it was really kind of pretty too much in your face. I was impressed because we've seen, and this is not in a derogatory sense, a slew of very religiously backed films lately, and I thought this was by far the most well-produced and well-acted. In most respects. I just thought the script suffered a little bit. And so relative to God's Not Dead, I think, no pun intended, preaching to the choir.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, I stole it from you. Sorry, I'm talking first. It really does preach to the choir. I don't think this is going to convince many things. I found it interesting, and sorry to get off on my high horse here. I found it interesting that they do attempt to provide the opposing view, the scientific view, because they bring up Dawkins and Hawking and a lot of those folks. But I happen to be pretty up on that, and certainly I'm no astrophysicist or anything like that. I happen to know one.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty up on that, and this is the point of propaganda: is it touches on it, but it doesn't tell the whole story behind it. So I thought it was interesting that they did that. I thought it was a relatively balanced approach, but it's very clearly propagandistic. If you're of that bent, I think you're going to love this film, and if you're not, I don't think it's going to sway anybody really.
No, I think if you're not of that bent, it's going to reinforce your opinions.
Perhaps.
Pretty strongly. I went in kind of knowing this is the movie that I feared Heaven is for Real was going to be.
Okay, right.
And Heaven is for Real I liked a lot because it tried to look at various possibilities. I mean, ultimately it went in the direction I kind of thought it would go.
Sure.
But at least it entertained alternate opinions. And this, from the get-go, they're mocking anybody
Right.
who's terribly well educated or has an opinion that differs from theirs, or is, left-leaning. They're made to be, uncaring and cold people who ultimately die. They ultimately get there. I don't want to give anything away, but they ultimately get what's coming to them. It was very cheesy to me. I thought, oh wow, it's interesting. Maybe this will be a debate between the
Right.
college professor and the student, but it's not. And it's so unrealistic that all of the atheists or people who aren't religious are so aggressively and hatefully so. And they touch on another religion, and I'm like, oh wow, maybe this movie is going to show that religion is important no matter what your religion is, because
Right.
there isn't just one right one. How can there be? Because there are all these others that have brought up. No. There's only one right one
sure
according to
seems
this
to be.
movie, and everybody sees the light and goes to a big concert at the end.
But it's so strange, just to jump in, that
Yeah.
one character, one real vilified character throughout the whole film, does see the light, it seems, at the end, and he's punished for it.
Yeah.
So how strange. It's a very lopsided kind of a film.
It cracked me up because I'm not going to. I'll dance around it in case anybody wants to see it.
Right.
Because I think if you want to see it, you will probably like it. This character is in a terminal situation, and somebody who's trying to console him says, "Well, you've been given a gift that you weren't killed instantly." And I'm thinking he was given the gift of suffering and agony with crushed ribs for a few more minutes before he died. I'm not sure how much of a gift that is. So yeah, I won't belabor the point.
Right.
This, my understanding is that this is probably not going to be here past this week. So if anybody does want to see this at Keene Cinemas, go sooner than later, because there's some big stuff coming out, and this is a small movie that's been around for a little while, so this is going to get cycled out pretty fast.
Right.
But yeah, it was not for me. It felt like a kind of TV movie that the Family Channel would produce or something
Sure.
like that. Very light, very one-sided, very something to make you feel good about who you are if you
have
on
to
that
be
team.
of it, right.
So anyway, that's all we had in the theaters this week. Kind of an odd week in the theater.
Yes, it
Two
was.
films that we hadn't really heard of that probably won't be around for very long.
Right.
So
that won't be the case next week.
no. Something larger.
But we do
in
thank
charge.
Joe and Suzanne and everybody, Trevor, everybody over there at Keene Cinemas.
Absolutely. And we shuffle along to thank all of our
Right
friends
down the road.
at Video Headquarters. I had a wonderful time talking to people at all these stores this weekend who are about to give us that which we are about to discuss. So, speaking of religion, Zac Efron and his bros vow to not commit to a serious relationship.
That's the politically correct way.
Yes, for the love of their brotherhood and being slightly misogynistic in that awkward moment.
Oh, wasn't that funny?
No,
not at all.
Nor was the film.
That's true.
I thought.
That's probably true. I'll agree.
I found everybody in it more or less annoying
They are annoying, yeah.
and just nasty. And
Is that what it means to be like hip and 20s-ish now? I don't know.
douche, as
Yeah,
they say? Yeah, I didn't like it at all. It's not like consistently really crude. I mean, I guess if you're somebody who really wants to see most of Zac Efron naked,
Right.
then you probably would get something out of this. And I guess I don't hold that against anybody. There's a joke to be made there, but I won't. Because there are certain films that I've watched over the years where it's like, hey, that person's naked, and that makes it all okay. But as far as a story or anything goes, it's Efron and his guys, they all are saying, we're not going to get committed, but they all kind of find somebody and secretly,
Right.
get committed. And if you like this movie, you should be. No, I just thought they were all really annoying, and it's not until, not to give anything away, until like the very end that he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I was such an awful person, and will you love me, and blah blah blah. I'm like, yeah, but for the first 90 minutes, I didn't want to see you in this movie, and for the last minute 30, I'm supposed to think everything is cool. Nah,
Right.
There are better movies than this to watch about guys chasing tails, to be crude.
We've seen so many films, and this doesn't quite qualify for me in that where it's a group of people get together and make a movie because it's just kind of the fun thing to do. I'm thinking there was one about the end of the world.
This is
recently.
the end.
This is the end,
Yeah.
yeah, just not funny. But it felt like a bunch of people getting together. This one it starts off with the premise, as you say, we're all going to bond together, and we're never going to commit and break apart the band of brotherhood that we have. So you know from the outset that's exactly what's going to happen, and you're just waiting to see the plodding, mechanical way that this unfolds. The actors are good enough. I like Efron, but he's just annoying in this one. The actors are okay enough, but it's the characters that are annoying. And I mean, you used the term, and you're exactly right. They're kind of insipid and smarmy, and I don't. Ultimately, this is one of the problems with annoying characters, and I try to tell my film students this, is you need to create this emotional bond with your audience so that you at least like them, so that whatever your characters want, your audience hopes that they get it. Right. I didn't give a care about these people, and I wish that they would lose in many respects.
Well, the guy gets hit by a car, and you're like, yes!
Yeah, right.
And he gets up again.
And he's in good shape, too bad.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, you're right, that this is it's very see-through, it's very plodding and mechanical, nothing too clever, and I just was, not that I was looking forward to this, but this is one that I can't recommend to pretty much anybody, because if you're a Efron fan, unless, like you say, you want to see him unclothed mostly, this isn't even among his best work, if you can name it that. So yeah, that awkward moment is about 90 minutes of awkward moments for me.
Right.
Sorry. Well, back to some more awkwardness, perhaps. Aaron Eckhart, one of my favorite actors of recent days lately, has to fight Bill Nighy and a bunch of evil, nefarious monsters, because Eckhart plays Frankenstein's monster. He's been rekindled and he's off. He just can't you just leave him alone? But no, I guess the case is that somebody wants to learn the secret of his immortality, and they're going to find out, because Aaron Eckhart is I, Frankenstein. There was an ending of What Would Surely Die Now, but What Would Surely Die Now is my interest in these films, I think. Wow. As you said off air, so I'll steal another one from you, from the producers of Underworld and all those guys. It's just the exact same thing. I like Eckhart so much. He's an interesting actor. He's been in some great movies. This is not one of them. Pretty boring.
Referring to this when the trailers were playing incessantly until this came out originally. Sexy Kung Fu Frankenstein is what I was calling this. It's exactly the same as the Underworld movies. It looks just like them. There's even a line in the middle of it where a war has gone on since time began that humanity knows nothing about, and we fight for the light to keep the darkness at bay. And I'm like, did they lift that dialogue from an Underworld movie? It's, if I'm remembering this correctly, it is gargoyles versus demons.
Right.
And they dig up Frankenstein. It actually gives you a recap of the original Frankenstein book, which is kind of cool, because most movies Frankenstein movies don't actually follow that path.
Right.
And basically these, I can't remember who the good guys are. I think the gargoyles are the good guys.
Yes.
The demons? I don't know. The good guys basically dig him up and say, we need you, and enlist him to be a sexy Kung Fu Frankenstein for the side of light. Very cheesy / not great CG in this, as you can see in that. And I will say that some of the fighting is well conveyed visually, which almost no action movies bother to do anymore. So some of the hand-to-hand stuff, at least, I mean, it's sexy Kung Fu Frankenstein fighting this guy with like a big rubber demon head mask. It looks really silly, but it's like somebody is really performing this, and it's good. And so I can appreciate the fighting in it.
Right, it doesn't look like CG fighting. It looks like real actors fighting.
It's not overcut and badly shot and shaky cam garbage.
In trying to, because you and I both like movies, and we try to have good things to say about it.
I like dumb ones too.
In trying to find something, not that this is that bad, but positive to say about it, could we say, would you agree, that if you like the Underworld movies and just want to see another one, you might enjoy it?
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, you might. It didn't do it for me. And
no.
Every time a demon is again, if they're bad guys, is vanquished, it looks like when Buffy would stake a vampire in Buffy, and which is an interesting effect. So there is an audience for this. It just ain't me.
Right. No me.
So that's what I would say, for whatever that's worth.
Right.
Up next, is it me?
It's you.
It's me. Wow. Cool. So, what do you do when you're a theatrically inclined camper at a summer camp for the theatrically inclined, and someone starts killing people? Probably, if you're like me, you get stage fright. Eek!
Eek. You can
Shocker
say that.
ending there.
Yes.
So the way we got this is that we get press releases for Saturday Fright Special that I do, and anything we might want to review, we say, yes, please. And they sent a link that was the first 10 minutes of this film, which opens with a scene that is a brutal slasher movie opening that I was like, ooh, wow, they went there. And it felt like a Dario Argento movie, which I love. And then it goes from that to a silly, full-blown musical number with all of these theatrical campers, and I was like, what is this movie? So I had to get it for us to watch.
Well, thank you so much.
I like this a lot.
It was okay.
It's funny when it wants to be funny, and when it wants to be a serious slasher movie, it feels like an 80s slasher movie. And so many movies are emulating and trying to go back to 80s slasher movies, which frankly is a genre that I don't know is worth going back to. But this movie nails it. It's one of those horror comedies that I hold in esteem because it's funny when it wants to be, but it is also menacing and gruesome when it wants to be. It does not steer clear of gore when it wants to. But at the same time, you have these young, wonderful, fresh-faced children singing and dancing about various things. And unlike Legends of Oz, this movie has a song that has been stuck in my head since I saw it that I won't repeat because it might be a little untoward on TV. But I thought this was really good. This was made in Canada, where technically most of the good slasher movies of the 80s were made, funny enough. Production values are pretty high for what is probably not a high budget, but it looks like a theatrical movie. This is currently available on iTunes and on demand, and is playing theatrically somewhere not here. So we stuck this in the video section of the show because that's pretty much how you're going to see it.
Right.
Probably be on DVD in a few months, and where I will probably buy this because I really like this a lot.
Really? You liked it that much?
Not many familiar faces. You've got Minnie Driver in a cameo. You've got Meatloaf, or Mr. Loaf as I like to call him, as the person who runs this troubled camp. And other than that, it's all unknowns, which I think works fine, and I thoroughly enjoyed Stage Fright.
Right. No, I think the fact that it's unknowns, I mean, you recognize Minnie Driver. I think most people will recognize her face, and maybe
bigger
not
a little while ago,
be able to place it. It's been a while, and whether or not you notice Meatloaf. I thought the performances were all fine. Again, this is one that you thrust upon me, and most of the time I don't know how to take that quite. But yeah, when they launch into the first musical number, I thought, Stage Fright, I look at the trailer, I figured this is just going to be a straight up slasher film.
Same here.
Great, I sit down to watch this afternoon, only a couple of hours ago. And then they kick into these musical numbers and what is this movie all about?
And they're not cheap, they're like well recorded, and the performers are really good.
And the songs are pretty clever. They're very cleverly written. So what I give this, for me, this movie missed its mark. I didn't think the blend between the horror and the musical comedy worked quite properly.
It's a rough shift. I mean, it is too, because it is seriously horror and it is seriously a musical comedy.
There's no two ways about it. You're exactly right. So I didn't think this blend worked quite well for me, but I give it high marks for attempting at least something that, to my knowledge, I don't recall has ever been attempted.
I mean, you get a hint of Phantom of the Paradise, if you know that, which is kind of both, and a bit of Friday the 13th. I mean, those are the two movies I would say. Maybe throw Glee into the mix. And that's kind of what it felt like.
If it's Glee meets Friday the 13th, I think that'd be about right. So I thought performances overall were really quite good. It just kind of started off on such a weird bent that maybe we can do some folks, our viewers, a favor and let you know that don't go into this thinking this is either straight comedy or straight horror. Look for a kind of an amusing blend, and I think they'd enjoy it.
I did.
Yeah.
And then finally...
So another one, a pretty well-known and Academy Award nominated, Joaquin Phoenix plays a lonely letter greeting card writer who is looking for love in all the wrong places until he decides to upgrade his OS because he falls in love with her.
Yeah.
And we're back. Strange film. Now, Spike Jonze, I can't expect anything like too
for anybody over 30, not the 40s band leader.
Oh, right, yeah.
Not Defreur's face. Okay.
But I like Joaquin Phoenix, and again, he keeps saying, I'm never going to make another movie, and as long as I live in it, he keeps coming out with films like this. A lot of names that you'll recognize in this, and a lot of faces. Olivia Wilde is in this. Amy Adams plays a small role in this, and so interesting performances. But again, this is slightly futuristic. I think in like 10 years, maybe, not even much more than that.
It's not jetpacks and silver suits futuristic.
Right.
It's a little... technology has advanced a bit from where we are right now.
We've got these huge 3D interactive video games that he plays with one of the most hilarious characters I've seen in film before. So, I mean, I keep thinking back to a lot of these scenes. It's just such a weird situation because, ultimately what happens, and we heard a little bit of it, is that he upgrades to this new OS, which learns as she or he, depending on what sex you decide to give your computer, controls all of the functions of the computer, and you can connect with it to your telephone
and through like an earpiece,
right, and all that. And so it really develops a personality, and this is kind of like in my opinion, a mixture of Colossus: The Forbidden Project in which a computer like takes over the world, and 2001: A Space Odyssey. And
there's a Twilight Zone episode called "From Agnes with Love" with
yes.
Wally Cox is similar to this.
Right, and then Any Love Story, Love Story, I guess.
Yeah.
Wonderful, a wonderful voiceover for her. She has this wonderful personality.
It's Scarlett Johansson.
Scarlett Johansson, and she's just wonderful. Joaquin Phoenix is wonderful. It's a strange, quirky, what can I expect from Spike Jonze, love story that goes all sorts of different directions, and I was constantly kept off bay or off armed and didn't quite know where it was going. So this certainly kept my interest up. Production design was very, very interesting.
It was nice to look at.
It's just one of the strangest films. Not weird, not off-putting, but just a strange film that I think ultimately I have to recommend because it's so interesting.
I liked it. I feel like it was maybe a little too long.
Okay, I can agree.
May have been when I was watching it. I watched this last night.
Right, I was done about 1 o'clock in the morning.
So part of it was me just wanting to get on to other things, but it's slow but not boring. I'm sensitive to boring, and this wasn't boring. It just floaty is the word I would give this. The music you hear in the trailer, it kind of floats along, and
which she created, right? I think.
I
think she may have composed that.
Yeah, in the context of the film. And Phoenix is very kind of mellow and kind of a slow and low talker. And he kind of, it reminds me of other movies, which I can't quite put my finger on, but he kind of wanders through life, and it's very quiet, and it's very pretty to look at, and very soft. And so this isn't a movie for everybody. If you're the kind of person who's really mad you didn't go see Neighbors this weekend, this is probably not the movie for you. If you like a lot of explosions, this probably isn't for you. I would call this more of an art house movie, but I think normal people could probably like this movie too. Just you'd have to be willing to be patient and go with it. But it was kind of cool. And again, speaking of a Twilight Zone episode, watching this, I was thinking, you could probably cut this down enough, and this could work. This same story could have worked as a Twilight Zone episode.
Okay.
Because it's kind of science fiction in a way.
Sure, it is.
It's what I had liked about Transcendence. It's taking technology that kind of exists or almost exists and taking a story in a direction that is made possible with science, which is kind of science fiction.
Well, if you kind of want to, and I don't think it's overthinking it, I think this is the intention of the film. But, it's about how we're disconnected by technology, that we have this character who ultimately falls in love with the technology. And not to give too much away, we find out toward the end that maybe that's not the best thing in the world to have happen. And I think the suggestion is maybe we need to reintegrate and create relationships with actual people, with our own selves.
Well, there's a movie, and I'm thinking if I'm getting the title right, a movie called Disconnect that we reviewed in the show a while back on video.
Yeah.
And that was more or less about the same thing. It was everybody is connected online, but in a way they're disconnected from each other in reality, and maybe it's time to pull the plug and talk to people in person. So interesting film.
It was.
I kind of liked it. Spike Jonze does interesting work. I don't always enjoy them, but you remember them.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, you may not enjoy his stuff, but he gets you thinking, and I think that's always good. And in many respects, in trying to compare this to Disconnect, I think you're right that this one, and I think good, and for want of a better term, I think Jonze does aspire to art. I think this kind of is enough distance and it's enough futuristic that it kind of slips its message in underneath there. So, the more and more I talk about it, the more respect I have for this.
And that's all we have this week.
It's true. It's kind of slow.
As new stuff. Was there any old business, new business, or show business you wanted to discuss?
No business whatsoever would be business.
No business is good business.
That's right.
Next week, pretty darn sure we're going to be talking about a big giant green lizard walking through some American cities.
That's probably so. I'm looking forward to it.
And we'll talk about Godzilla. The new American take on Godzilla, which hopefully will eradicate from memory the previous American take on Godzilla, which was a really bad movie. I like Godzilla movies, so I'm nervous about this.
I think it looks like nice and almost serious.
It looks well made.
I'm hearing hints that Godzilla then goes and attacks other giant behemoths, which
I hope so.
Which could bother me. I don't know. But Bryan Cranston is in it, one of my favorite actors, and I'm looking forward to what he has to do.
Well, what's funny is the teaser trailer came out, which was very well done and attention-getting, and you see all these recognizable faces, and there's all this gravitas, and then the word Godzilla comes up at the end, and the audience has a reaction to that.
Absolutely.
So I'm excited for the conversation we're going to have about that next week.
And as much as I meant to say this last week, but as much as I appreciate you folks watching the show, I got to remind you that 24 is on now. Why are you watching us? I'm not watching us.
I'm watching us.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Jeez. Support the team. And 24, which I'm
Yes.
very excited about.
There you
12
go.
episodes, so it's going to be a shorter
Yes,
run.
it will be.
And I watched the first one, and it was gloriously violent. So
Absolutely.
that made me happy. So if we should we just kind of
Until next week.
tie a bow on it?
Probably.
I'm Mark.
I'm Tom.
And we are
the Cinemaniacs.